Hi, my name's Relin, and last Thanksgiving, my parents told me I was no longer welcome at the table. My table. They said I was a burden after I'd paid every bill, kept the house running, even covered my brother's expenses without a single thank you. But the worst part? It wasn't that they kicked me out. It's that they planned it, quietly, weeks before. So I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just pulled the plug. And then, I watched everything they built fall apart without me. But what really happens when you stop funding your own erasure? Stick around, you're about to find out. Thanksgiving in our house always felt like performance art. Awkward smiles, half-hearted hugs, everyone acting like we actually liked each other. This year, though, something about the air felt different. Maybe it was the way my mother kept looking past me when I asked if she needed help with the stuffing. Or maybe it was the silence between her and my father, sharp, loaded, and louder than the old jazz playing faintly in the background. The house smelled like overcooked turkey and burnt onions. The oven had been set too high, and my mother, Loma, didn't bother adjusting it. She just kept pushing things around on the counter like she didn't care anymore. I wiped the kitchen counter one last time, then checked my phone. A notification reminded me the electricity bill had cleared that morning, automatically paid from my account, like it had been for over 2 years now. My brother Darren sat planted on the couch, eyes glued to the game. I don't think he moved a muscle all afternoon, except to open another soda. I passed behind him with the serving tray, and he didn't even acknowledge me. That was normal. The guests arrived late, of course. Always do. A few aunts, a cousin, and Uncle Kenny, who still smelled like car oil and Coors Light, even in his Sunday shirt. There were mumbled greetings at the door. Lots of, "You look great," and, "Oh, it's been too long." Nobody asked how I was doing. No one ever did. The table was set, sort of. The plates didn't match, and the centerpiece was a dusty plastic wreath that had seen at least 5 Novembers. No one said grace, no one toasted. People just started serving themselves like it was a sad potluck instead of Thanksgiving dinner. I asked my mom if we had cranberry sauce. She pretended not to hear me. Halfway through the meal, Merle, my father, cleared his throat and stood up. He held his wine glass high like he was about to make a wedding toast. "We need to talk about something," he said, his voice flat. "It's time we make some space for those who contribute nothing." I stopped chewing. A couple of forks clinked against plates, and someone coughed. His eyes landed right on me. "You've been here long enough, and frankly, it's time to leave." The silence that followed was unlike anything I've ever experienced. Not the awkward kind, not the "someone said something uncomfortable" kind. This was heavy, like a door had just slammed shut inside my chest. I glanced at Darren. He stared down at his plate like it was suddenly fascinating. My mother didn't even flinch, just kept slicing the turkey like it was any other Thursday night. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Merle went on, his voice suddenly more animated. "You're 25, no husband, no job worth talking about, no mortgage. You're just here, existing. This house isn't some retirement plan for freeloaders." Aunt Beverly whispered something to the cousin sitting next to her. I caught the word embarrassing. My face burned. I finally found my voice. "Are you serious right now?" Merle set his glass down with a thud. "Dead serious. It's time to grow up. You're not a child anymore, Relin." I stood slowly, hands trembling. My chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. I looked around the table, at faces that had known me since I was born. Not one person said a word in my defense. "I've been paying the power bill since Dad lost his job," I said, voice shaking. "Groceries, internet, half of Darren's credit card." My father waved a hand. "No one asked you to." "No," I said quietly. "You just let me." I walked out before the tears could escape. Not because I was ashamed, but because I couldn't sit 1 second longer in a room full of people who thought I was invisible. Outside, the air was wet and cold. My breath fogged up the windshield as I sat in the driver's seat, keys still in my hand. I didn't start the car. I just stared at the front door, waiting for it to open, waiting for someone, anyone, to follow me, to say they didn't mean it, that it was just a stupid outburst, that they were sorry. No one came. My phone buzzed once, an alert that the auto payment for the internet had gone through. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was pathetic. Because I had paid for the very Wi-Fi they were using inside to scroll their phones while pretending nothing just happened. They never saw me, not really, not as a daughter, not as family, just as a utility, useful until no longer convenient. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was just past 7. Not late enough for what had just happened to feel like it belonged to the past, but already too late to take any of it back. They don't need me anymore? Fine. Let's see how long they last without me. I didn't drive off right away. The engine stayed off, and the only warmth came from my coat and the breath fogging up the window. Outside, fog curled through the front yard like it had nowhere better to be. Inside that house, I imagined they were already halfway through dessert. Maybe Darren was going for a second helping. Maybe my mother was wiping down the counters, pretending nothing had happened. That's how they were. Good at editing reality to fit their comfort. I tapped open my banking app. The electricity, internet, and grocery deliveries were all still coming out of my account. Every single service keeping that house running had my name tied to it. It hit me then, not as a surprise, but as a confirmation. I was never a guest in that house. I was the infrastructure. There was no panic in my chest, no fight or flight sensation, just a quiet clicking inside, like pieces snapping into place. This wasn't a breakdown. This was clarity. It reminded me of last March. The internet had gone out right before one of my dad's football games. He'd shouted from the living room like the house had personally betrayed him. I was at work but paid the bill on my lunch break so he wouldn't throw a tantrum. When I got home, he just muttered, "About time you handled something," and turned the volume up. Then, in July, Darren's room heater broke during that random cold snap. He stood in the hallway in his socks, arms crossed, like I owed him something. I ordered a space heater and had it delivered the next morning. He took it upstairs without a word. No, thank you. Not even eye contact. Now, sitting alone in my car, I scrolled through the notes on my phone. I had kept an informal expense log out of habit. Grocery trips, utility bills, even that $230 charge from when my mom's old phone died, and I bought her a refurbished one. Over the past year alone, I'd spent over $9,000 keeping them afloat. Not once did anyone acknowledge it. Not a single conversation about splitting costs or repaying. I was just expected to handle it, like the house had sprouted an extra daughter who could print money. I leaned my head back and looked at the ceiling of the car. That dining room scene kept playing in my mind. The way Merle said I had no job worth talking about, like my stability wasn't stability unless it benefited him. The way Loma kept carving that turkey, eyes fixed on the meat like it was more important than her daughter's dignity. But now that I was outside the moment, I saw it differently. The signs had been showing for months. My mother had stopped asking how work was going. Darren had started taking my things, chargers, groceries, shampoo, without asking. My father barely looked up from the TV when I entered a room. They weren't just tired of me. They were preparing to remove me. The dinner wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't a heated reaction or someone saying something out of line. It was coordinated. They picked the holiday for a reason, so they could use the excuse of tough love and hide behind phrases like, "It's time to grow up," and "Everyone needs to learn the hard way." Classic American family theater. Cruelty camouflaged as wisdom. They wanted plausible deniability. I exhaled through my nose and looked out at the house one more time. The lights were on in every room. I imagined my name still attached to every switch, every socket, every digital account keeping those walls warm and connected. I didn't cry. That version of me, the one who begged to be understood, had quietly disappeared during the mashed potatoes. I reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a small notepad, and started writing. Electric bill, auto payment, cancel. Wi-Fi router, logged in last week, change password. Amazon Prime, still under my email. Remove card. Grocery delivery. Instacart shared with mom. Disconnect. The list kept growing. The more I wrote, the more I realized how deeply I had been embedded in that household. Financially, logistically, emotionally. They didn't just ask me to leave. They amputated me while still depending on my heartbeat. I sat with that thought. Let it sink into my bones. I didn't get kicked out. I got freed. They just didn't realize that the storm they had been shielding themselves from was me. And now that I was gone, they were going to feel every inch of the cold they had ignored. By the time I pulled up to Nadine's place the next morning, the sun was already creeping up the side of her porch railing, casting a quiet glow over her garden gnome collection. The spare key she left under the terracotta pot hadn't moved, and the screen door let out a soft wheeze when I pushed it open. Her house was always neat, clean without being sterile. The kind of order that came from someone who liked things in their place, but didn't obsess. I didn't sleep much. I'd spent the night at a motel on the edge of town, needing somewhere I wouldn't be recognized or questioned. Nadine had texted after her early shift started. "Spare room's yours. Coffee's in the second drawer." She always knew how to offer comfort without stepping on my pride. I made myself a cup. Too bitter, too thin, but warm. The tiny guest room was painted a pale green and smelled like dryer sheets. My suitcase leaned against the wall, half unpacked. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. Another round of cancellations. Spotify, Hulu, Instacart. The landline that only telemarketers called. All under my name. All gone now. Freedom didn't feel like a declaration. It felt like maintenance. Quiet, necessary, unglamorous, but real. Out of habit more than anything, I clicked open Facebook. I hadn't used it in months, but something told me to check. My mother had posted a photo, Thanksgiving from last year, the one where I'd rushed home from work to cook half the meal and set the timer on the camera to snap a family picture before dessert. In the repost, I was gone. Literally cropped out. It wasn't a mistake. The angle was too deliberate. The caption underneath made my skin crawl. Family through thick and thin. Just us. That "just us" hit harder than anything my father had said the night before. I closed the tab, but the image stuck to the inside of my skull like gum on a shoe. I still remembered the way my dad had insisted on changing into a nicer shirt for that photo, just in case we sent it in for the Christmas letter. The way my mom had adjusted her scarf 3 times. The way I'd run to get the camera battery from the kitchen drawer because no one else thought to check it. But now, I wasn't even in the frame. It wasn't grief I felt. Not really. It was sterilization. Like they'd gone in with tweezers and carefully removed me, then wiped the edges clean. Later that afternoon, after Nadine returned home, I asked if I could pick up a few things I had stored at her place last year, just a box or 2 of files and receipts. She nodded, pointed to the linen closet. "Everything's just where you left it." I dug through the box labeled "Important Docs" and found what I was looking for. My old budget spreadsheet I'd built for Mom when she couldn't keep track of their monthly expenses. Next to it was a crumpled sticky note in her handwriting. The ink had faded, but I could still make it out. "Remove R's name from utility. Darren to take router." I sat on the floor, holding that paper like it might combust in my hands. I didn't know what hurt more, that they had planned it, or that they didn't even bother hiding the evidence. Darren, the son who hadn't paid a dime toward anything in 5 years, the one who used my Amazon account to order gaming headsets and still acted like I was just crashing at their house temporarily. Now suddenly, he was being given my place, literally. They were transferring the structure of the home from me to him, like I was an employee being replaced during a department restructure. It wasn't a meltdown, it was a transition, and I wasn't even invited to the meeting. The rest of the evening, I moved in slow motion, like someone recovering from surgery who hadn't yet felt the pain. I called my office's HR rep, confirmed I could work remotely for the rest of the week. No one asked why. I didn't offer an explanation. I spent the next hour creating a folder on my desktop titled Family Transition Do Not Delete. Inside went everything: screenshots of payment records, the cropped Facebook post, the utility statement with my name on it, the photo of the note with Darren's name in bold. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was organizing. Because whatever happened next, I didn't want to be caught flat-footed. No more benefit of the doubt. No more pretending things just got messy. They had made a plan. Now so would I. I didn't call them. Didn't send one of those long, cathartic texts that people write and hope will guilt someone into clarity. I didn't even feel the urge. That need had been surgically removed the night my father stood up in front of a table full of relatives and told me I was no longer welcome. They didn't just let me go. They erased me. But the thing is, I keep records. I archive. I back up what matters. And I don't delete easily. I didn't wait long after saving the folder. The minute I closed the laptop, I grabbed my phone and started logging into every account I could think of. No delay, no hesitation. If they had already decided I was out, then it was time to make it official. I sat at Nadine's kitchen table with my coffee going cold. The hum of her refrigerator was the only background noise, just steady enough to match my breathing. My fingers moved fast, not rushed, but precise. First the power bill, account settings, autopay removed, then the water. The email confirmation came in seconds later. Automatic payments deactivated. Good. Next. Internet. I changed the password for the router, knowing full well Darren wouldn't be able to reset it without calling customer service, and that would require a PIN only I knew. Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, gone. I unlinked my card from Mom's grocery app, canceled the Prime subscription, and deleted the shared calendar reminders for bill due dates I had set up to keep them on track. Every notification sent to the house email was like a digital whisper. You're on your own now. I didn't send a warning. No passive-aggressive text, no dramatic goodbye post, just quiet action. They made the choice to act like I was disposable. I was simply respecting their decision. The next morning, I was halfway through sorting laundry when my phone buzzed. 7 missed calls from Mom's cell. No voicemails at first. Then, finally, one came through. Her voice sharp, but with a tinge of confusion. "Relin, the internet's not working. Your father's yelling. I don't know what's going on. Did something happen with the bill?" I didn't respond. Not 5 minutes later, Darren texted me directly. "Not a meme. Not a snarky comment like usual. Did you turn everything off?" I stared at the screen. Then typed, slowly, deliberately, "You said I was a burden." So I removed the burden. Read. No reply. For the rest of that day, the silence was oddly satisfying. No more sudden requests for money. No panicked texts about groceries not arriving. Just nothing. I folded laundry in peace. Watched half an old documentary I hadn't finished in months. No guilt for sitting down. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in. Rain tapped against Nadine's windows, steady and constant. I curled up with a blanket, my phone plugged in beside me. I was just about to fall asleep when the buzzing started again. Another voicemail from my mother, this one less guarded. "I hope you're happy," she snapped. "We're freezing in here. Nothing's working. You could have said something instead of pulling a stunt like this. This is still your home, Relin." Still my home. I stared at the wall for a while. Her words were sharp, but something else hit harder. How casually she claimed ownership of a relationship she'd dismantled piece by piece. I listened again. Not to the words, but the tone. Desperation, frustration. But no apology, no acknowledgement. Just panic at losing control. I blocked her number. If they couldn't hear me when I was helping, they wouldn't get to scream at me now that I'd stopped. I sat at the edge of the bed, pulled out my journal, the one I hadn't touched in nearly a year. On a clean page, I wrote one sentence. "I'm not a wallet. I'm a person. No follow-up, no elaboration, just that." It was enough. For the first time in months, I didn't feel obligated to answer anyone. There were no mental to-do lists running on a loop in my head, no invisible pressure to fix things that weren't mine to fix. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I turned off the lamp and laid back, my eyes adjusting to the dim shadows on the ceiling. As the wind pressed against the windows and the storm rattled the gutters, a thought settled deep in my chest. The lights were off in their house, but they had turned out mine years ago. 2 days passed, and I hadn't said a word to anyone in that house. Not a call, not a text, not even a forwarded bill. And for once, I wasn't walking on mental eggshells about it. Nadine had offered her place as long as I needed, and during the day, I kept myself busy with remote work and errands. But that night, something shifted. I was sitting at her dining table, reviewing monthly reports on my work laptop, when my phone buzzed. The alert banner was short, but it made my entire body go still. Suspicious login attempt detected on your checking account. Then another. Password reset request denied. Device flagged as unrecognized. I didn't even need to open the details. I knew exactly where the attempt came from. I tapped into the security log just to confirm what my gut already screamed. The IP address was tied to my parents' house. They weren't just trying to pull me back emotionally. Now they were trying to tap into the only thing they had left to squeeze: my finances. They couldn't keep the lights on, so now they're reaching into my future. I didn't panic. That part of me had been cauterized the night they told me to pack my things over dinner rolls and ham slices. I opened the Chase app and hit the fraud reporting hotline. I went through every step with the rep like I was walking through a grocery list. Let's go ahead and start with a full credential reset. Yes, I'll activate two-factor authentication. No, that device is not mine. Block and blacklist it. I moved smoothly, almost mechanically, like I'd trained for this. And maybe in a way, I had. You don't survive in a family like mine without learning how to protect what's yours. By the time the call ended, I had new login credentials, fresh debit cards on order, and biometric security turned on. I took screenshots of every alert and added them to the same folder on my desktop where I'd stored the cropped photo and the sticky note about Darren taking over the router. I opened my journal again and wrote one line. If they want a war, they'll need more than my password. It didn't feel like rage. It felt like resolve. After shutting the laptop, I got up and moved around Nadine's kitchen slowly. I poured a glass of water, stretched my arms, and forced myself to take a breath. Then, back at the table, I tapped into my voicemail archive. There was one from my mother I hadn't deleted, left just days before the dinner that ended it all. Her voice came through, casual but barbed. You've got until Sunday to figure out where you're going. Don't think we'll wait forever. If you don't come back, don't be surprised if things start getting ugly. I stared at the screen. Then I saved it. Renamed the file Evidence Zuolchat M4A. Still not enough. I opened the voice recorder app and started a new memo. This time, I wasn't emotional. I wasn't performing. I spoke slowly, deliberately. Statement of Rylin Vance. Date. Today's date. The following documentation and behavior patterns outline attempts by Merle Creed and Loma Creed to gain unauthorized access to my financial accounts. Verbal threats were made prior to and following my withdrawal from the household. Security breach attempts began approximately 48 hours after account separation. It wasn't just about documenting. It was about no longer letting them define the version of me that existed in the story they tell other people. I'd spent years letting them narrate, while I paid the bills, and they played victim to each other's failures. Not anymore. I clicked save, labeled it Deposition Draft 01. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt armed. After some pacing, I sat back down and pulled up my email. I typed out a message to Linda, a lawyer I knew through a coworker. She handled family mediation and digital harassment cases. Subject: Potential financial breach. Family members. I attached the screenshots, the voicemail file, and a brief summary. Linda, I'm not filing anything yet, but I want this documented. If things continue, I may need a formal cease and desist. Let me know what steps I should be prepared for. I didn't send it. I saved it in drafts. Because this wasn't a fire to put out. It was a fuse to watch, and part of me wanted to give them one last unspoken opportunity to back off. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed to know, beyond all doubt, that I'd done everything I could to end this without escalation. But if they crossed the line again, they'd be walking into a paper trail I'd started years ago and only now was organizing properly. I used to let things slide. Now I let them stack. As evidence, the draft email sat in my outbox for 2 days, untouched. I'd reread it a few times, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to be sure I was giving them one last chance to back off quietly. Maybe that was the last sliver of me hoping someone in that house would do the right thing. They didn't. Early Thursday morning, I made a quick stop at my storage unit on the way to the grocery store. The rain had finally let up, and the air smelled like damp leaves and cold metal. I was there to grab my winter coat and a pair of boots I hadn't needed until now. The box was labeled Seasonals, Bedroom, shoved behind 2 bins of old holiday decorations and a vacuum I no longer used. As I lifted the lid, my eyes scanned past folded sweaters and scarves, pausing on the empty spot where my tote bag used to sit. Not just any bag. The taupe leather tote I had splurged on last Christmas as a gift to myself. It wasn't cheap. I remembered wrapping it myself and putting it under the tree, just to feel like I was allowed to have something nice too. But it was gone. I checked the other bins. Nothing. My breath slowed. There were no signs of a break-in, no damage to the lock, no sign anyone had forced their way in. But something had been taken, and not just anything. Something personal, something symbolic. Back in Nadine's car, I opened Facebook Marketplace out of sheer instinct. I typed in taupe leather tote, added my city, and refreshed. There it was. Same brand, same slight scuff on the bottom left corner. Listed as lightly used, barely worn. The seller's location? My mother's town. The name on the profile was fake, Carol M., but the language in the post was hers. Stylish yet practical, can fit everything you need without the bulk. I'd heard her say that line verbatim at Thanksgiving dinner last year. I stared at the screen. I cut off the electricity, so now they're selling pieces of me. That afternoon, I created a new burner account and messaged the seller, asking to meet. I suggested the parking lot of a hardware store 10 minutes from their house, claiming I'd be in the area. Cash ready, I typed. When the day came, I didn't show up, but I parked 2 rows away in Nadine's SUV with tinted windows, camera ready. Sure enough, at 3:07 p.m., Loma pulled into the lot, holding my bag. She glanced around, then stood near her trunk, checking her phone. After 5 minutes, she gave up, tossed the bag in the back seat, and drove off. I took 5 clear photos. 1 of her face, 1 of the bag, 3 with timestamps and GPS tagged. Back home, I dropped them into my folder. In my Notes app, I typed, "This isn't desperation, it's entitlement." Later that evening, while finishing dinner, another alert came through, this time from my retirement account. Beneficiary information has been updated. I hadn't touched that account in months. I opened the dashboard and froze. A name I didn't recognize had been added, but it didn't take long to trace the move. I called the financial institution immediately. The woman on the phone was patient and professional, but I could hear the tightness in her voice once she pulled up the access log. "Looks like someone called yesterday pretending to be you," she explained. "They failed the voice verification, but had some of your old information, phone number from 2018, your mother's maiden name. It triggered a flag, and we froze any outbound requests." I closed my eyes. "Can you lock it permanently?" "Yes. We'll require in-person ID verification for any future changes." "Good," I said quietly. "Make it airtight." She paused, then added, "You're not the first client I've spoken to dealing with something like this, but I'm sorry you're going through it." When the call ended, I didn't feel shaken. I felt sharpened. "If they think they can reach into my future," I whispered to myself, "I'll make sure they don't even have a place in my present." The next morning, I called Linda. "I need a certified letter, today." We drafted it together. Short, direct, factual. It stated clearly, I had proof of unauthorized access attempts on multiple financial platforms. Property had been removed and listed for sale without permission. Any further attempts would result in a formal police report and civil litigation. No emotion, no plea, just documentation and consequences. I didn't send it out of anger. I sent it because it was necessary. People like them only understand silence when it comes in the form of certified mail. The envelope went out that afternoon. They'd receive it in 2 days. And for the first time, they wouldn't be able to pretend they hadn't been warned. Because this time, the warning had teeth. You don't get to steal from someone and still call it family. By the third morning, after the certified letter had been sent, I'd almost convinced myself they might finally leave me alone. I kept waiting for the silence to stretch, to mean something, but it didn't last. That evening, I was in Nadine's kitchen, halfway through chopping onions for a simple stir-fry, when the sound hit. 3 rapid bangs on the front door, heavy and angry. I froze, knife in mid-air. Nadine, who was flipping through mail near the hallway, stopped and whispered, "It's him, the man from before. Same coat, same posture." She didn't need to say his name. My body already knew. I stepped quietly toward the door and looked through the peephole. Merle, my father. His face was red, his fists clenched as he pounded again, this time yelling, "Open up! You think paperwork scares me? You're still my daughter. I have every right to talk to you." His voice cracked the quiet like thunder. Nadine mouthed, "Call the cops?" I nodded. I dialed 911 with a calmness I didn't expect. "My name is Rylene Vance. I'm at 216 Juniper, and a man, my estranged father, is trespassing and yelling outside the door. He's making verbal threats and won't leave." While I was still on the line, the shouting continued. "You think you can hide behind your fancy lawyer and act like we don't matter? This isn't over. You owe us. You owe me." His voice rattled the windows. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, breathing evenly as the dispatcher told me the officers were on their way. I relayed everything, clear, factual, emotionless. When the squad car pulled up 6 minutes later, blue lights flashing across the blinds, I didn't move from my spot. 2 officers approached him from both sides. Merle backed up, arms raised but mouth still running. "She turned her back on blood! She stole from us first! This is a betrayal of family!" Even as they restrained him, he kept yelling, "She thinks she's better than us now! We gave her everything!" The officer who wasn't handcuffing him approached the door. I opened it without hesitation. He asked if I was okay. I said yes. I handed him a copy of the cease and desist letter. I let them know there were audio records, financial logs, and previous warnings. Merle was still protesting when they guided him to the patrol car. "She's ungrateful. She's poisoned. You think she's innocent? Ask anyone. She's not the victim." But I said nothing. There were no tears, only a quiet fury that filled the space like heavy smoke. After they left, Nadine made tea without speaking. I sat at the kitchen table and texted my lawyer 2 words. It happened. I attached the time-stamped video from the porch camera Nadine had installed last year after a break-in scare, added a brief account of what he said, and logged the police report number. Later that night, as I was about to power down my phone, a message popped up from my cousin Cassine. She rarely messaged directly, but she always saw more than she let on. "You doing okay?" Before I could respond, she sent a screenshot. It was from the family group chat. A message from Loma. "Rylene's been brainwashed. She's letting outsiders convince her that we're enemies. She's trying to take everything from us. For what? Money? Attention?" There were several comments below. Some were the usual praying for clarity. Others were emoji reactions, sad faces, hands folded, hearts. Nobody defended me. Nobody asked for context. Nobody asked me. Cassine followed up. "You don't deserve this. I know what you've done for them." I remember. I didn't reply. I just saved the screenshot, labeled it Smears01, and dropped it into the same folder where the voicemail and the photo of my stolen bag lived. In my journal that night, I wrote, When they scream at your door and whisper behind your back, you're doing something right. I didn't write anything else. I didn't need to. The line had been crossed. Not by accident, not in the heat of the moment, not by someone who didn't understand the weight of their actions. This was willful, strategic, ugly, and I was done pretending otherwise. The next morning, I emailed Linda again. Subject: Escalation. Emergency incident documented. Inside, I attached everything: timestamps, screenshots, police report, and the group chat messages. I didn't ask her what I should do next. I told her what I was going to do. They brought the fight to my door. I just opened it and documented everything. Linda's email came back before noon. Letter delivered. Both parties signed for it. It's officially on record. Let me know if anything escalates further. I didn't smile. I didn't breathe a sigh of relief. The weight didn't lift, because I'd long stopped expecting peace. What I felt was something different. Completion. Like something had clicked into place that had been slightly off for years. It was a cold Friday morning. I was packing the last of my boxes from Nadine's guest room, taping up a crate labeled Important Docs. One copy of the cease and desist letter went inside. Another sat in my glove box. One more, freshly printed, went into a manila folder labeled Closure, which I carried under my arm like a badge. The new apartment was small, half the size of what I had before, but quiet. Clean walls, tall windows. Not a single voice in the next room asking for help, asking for money, asking what I was doing with my life. I set down the folder on the countertop, turned on the light, and stared at the bare floor. No couch yet, no bed frame, just me. And that was enough. The silence was unfamiliar, but not empty. It felt earned. Later that evening, while unpacking kitchenware, my phone buzzed. Loma. A text message. Your father's upset. You've gone too far. But if you want to talk, I forgive you. Let's move forward. We're still family. I didn't feel anger or sadness, just that steady, hollow clarity that comes when someone speaks without even trying to own what they did. Forgiveness? You don't get to burn a house down and then hand someone a broom. I took a screenshot, then deleted the thread. Not because I needed to forget, because I no longer needed the illusion of resolution. In my notes, I typed, "Forgiveness is easy when you've never admitted you did anything wrong." I didn't reply. I didn't want to. The next morning, I moved the last box in. Nadine helped carry a small bookshelf up the stairs. We didn't say much. She knew I didn't need advice. I just needed space. After she left, I lit a candle, made myself a cup of tea, and stood in the middle of the room. For a long time, I believed home was where you kept sacrificing in the hope that one day someone would notice. But this quiet room, this key in my hand, this paperwork with my name at the top, this was mine. No one gets to narrate my story anymore. Not a father who shouted until the walls shook. Not a mother who excused it with passive silence. Not a brother who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a face. I reached out to Cassen later that night. We hadn't spoken since she sent me the screenshot of the family group chat. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey," I said. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than I've been in years." She paused, then asked gently, "Where are you now?" I looked around the room. Cardboard boxes, a single chair, an unplugged lamp, and a candle burning low. "If anyone asks," I said, "tell them I'm where I should have been a long time ago." There was no applause, no dramatic music swelling in the background, just me on a second-hand mattress in a half-furnished apartment, drinking tea and reading lease documents in the glow of soft lighting. And it was enough. I didn't need a family reunion. I didn't need a confession. What I needed, what I finally gave myself, was permission to stop shrinking myself to fit into someone else's version of love. They ended it at the dinner table. I ended it with a signature. 2 months passed. The walls in my new place had started to feel familiar, not because I decorated them, but because they stopped echoing so much. I'd added a few shelves, stacked books without alphabetizing them, bought a secondhand rug that didn't match anything else, but made the floor warmer. The silence no longer felt like punishment. It had become part of the rhythm. Winter settled into Springfield with sharp mornings and soft evenings. I adjusted. I learned how to cook for one without over-prepping, how to sleep through the night without checking my phone, how to keep a plant alive. I worked, I paid bills, I took walks by myself, and didn't feel lonely doing it. There was a certain kind of freedom in not having to explain where I was, what I was doing, or why I hadn't responded to a text. I wasn't waiting for anyone to check on me. That used to sting. Now, it just felt like truth. Some nights, when the heater clicked off and the apartment went quiet, I'd stare at the framed mailbox label with my name on it. Not my father's. Not a married name, just mine. One line, one name. That was enough. Casson called late one evening. She never wasted time with pleasantries. "They lost the house," she said. I leaned back into the couch, letting the words land without surprise. "Evicted?" "Yep, 2 months behind on everything. Utilities got cut. Neighbors said they started running an extension cord through the window from a generator. Someone must have reported them." I said nothing. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't even curious. She went on. "Some folks are blaming you, saying you abandoned them." I exhaled, long and even. "And some?" She hesitated, then said, "Most just say it's not their business, but they remember who paid for Christmas dinner and who let the lights go out." I didn't need her to say it. The truth had already rooted itself in the silence that followed. I never wanted them to fail. I just stopped holding the roof up by myself. The next week, I stood at the front of a small community center, whiteboard behind me, 6 folding chairs in front. My budgeting workshop for women starting over was nothing fancy, just tips, spreadsheets, and stories I'd learned the hard way. One of the younger women stayed behind after everyone else had left. "Can I ask you something?" she said. I nodded, wiping down the dry erase board. "Did your family help you when you had to start over?" I smiled. Not bitter, just real. "They taught me what not to accept. That's still a kind of help." She didn't say anything at first, then smiled back. That was all either of us needed. Back home, I took out the drawer organizer in my desk and pulled out a small envelope. The paper was slightly worn at the corners from being opened, reread, then resealed. Again and again. But this time, I didn't open it. Inside was a letter I wrote to my parents months ago. Not to blame, not to beg, just to tell the truth. "You didn't break me," it read, "but you did show me where to stop giving." I tucked it back into the drawer and slid it shut without a sound. I stepped outside onto my porch. The air smelled like wet pavement and cedar mulch. My neighbor across the street waved while unloading groceries. I raised my hand in return. I didn't need them to see how far I'd come. I just needed to keep walking. I no longer needed a chapter titled Closure. What I had was space. Air. The ability to say no and not feel like I'd failed someone. That was worth more than any hollow apology ever would be. The scar remains. But I've healed around it. Before I close this chapter with you, I want to share something from the heart. Something I've come to understand not just through pain, but through clarity. Sometimes, walking away doesn't mean failure. It means survival. And survival, for people like us, often looks like choosing peace over apology, truth over tradition, and self-respect over forced loyalty. I spent years believing that if I gave more, stayed quiet longer, or endured just one more insult, I'd finally earn a seat at the table. But family isn't built on obligation, it's built on care. And if they won't give you a place, you have every right to build your own. I hope my story reminds you that it's okay to set boundaries, to protect your future, and to step into a life where you're no longer an afterthought. You are not here to keep others comfortable while you suffer in silence. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose distance over tradition? Have you ever been made to feel like a stranger in your own family? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched you, or share where you're watching from. If it didn't connect with you, tell me why. I'm here to listen. We're all still learning from each other. And hey, if you want to hear more stories like this, raw, honest, and full of hard-earned wisdom, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There's so much more we're going to talk about, and I'd be honored to have you with us. Until next time, take care of your heart. You only get one.